Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, Director of Content at AVS Forum. I'm here with Dave Bott, the founder of AVS, and Mark Waldrep, the founder and chief engineer, bottle washer, I would think as well, of AIX Records. Now, your big push into this industry is high definition audio, high quality audio. You know, we're bombarded with MP3s and low quality playback. You want to go in the other direction.
I do, very much so, and it was the opportunity that came about back in 2000-ish when we were looking for an alternative to CDs. So SACD comes along from Sony and Philips, who went into the DVD forum and said, ours is the next thing to replace, CDs. After DVD video was successful, now we're going to move into a DVD audio format or something else. I was a DVD audio guy because I'm a big believer in PCM over DSD. So there was this big initiative, let's do it better, let's look for that next generation thing. But the critical thing that was missed in that opportunity, and I think it still is very much the point, is that nobody went out and made new recordings to show off the increase in fidelity that was possible. We dug back into the catalogs, and I guess I would have done the same thing if I had a catalog to dig back into. At that point, I was a service bureau. I did records, I did Blu-rays and not Blu-rays at that time, but DVDs, regular DVD videos back for everybody else making movies and even concerts and lots of music stuff. And I said, somebody's got to show, find out, discover, illustrate, clearly demonstrate, drop people's jaw with sound that we can't get through AM radio, through FM radio, from CDs and everywhere else. And it's true that the CD fundamentally has the kind of dynamic range and the kind of frequency response that is large enough to include all of the commercial stuff coming out from the Warner Brothers and Universals and Sonys of the world.
Which typically doesn't have such a wide dynamic range.
Well, but it can. That's the thing. You talk about the potential of a format, then you talk about the market realities of that format. I was a mastering engineer for 13 years. Paul Rogers from Bad Company and The Firm, and was in my studio 5 separate occasions. Everything's fine with this record. Great. Not according to the record label. Not loud enough. Not loud enough. Not loud enough. Not loud enough. Make it louder. So I gave up mastering. I said, we have lost the magic that is part of that finesse thing. You're a musician. I mean, that's how we know each other originally. If somebody wants to hit a drum hard, it should feel like they hit a drum hard. So, but that's not radio friendly, and that's not the market norm. So we have this potential for better quality, but somebody's got to go out there and try and make it. Now I've been making recordings for classical ensembles, I've been making recordings for pop groups, I've been making live recordings in the backwoods of Haiti, for crying out loud. I've got a fair number of years in my belt of making stuff and trying stuff, and having studied binaural audio and stereo and so forth in my graduate degree. So what I decided to do, I'm going to sort of hybrid all those things together. We're going to bring lots of stereo pairs onto a stage of classical musicians, which is unheard of. You do that in a soundtrack, maybe. You might do that for a pop group, usually one microphone in front of somebody. But because we hear in stereo, I brought lots of microphones onto a stage. I did chamber music chamber music groups, orchestras, up and down, all styles of music. It's not a label that's specifically jazz or anything else. And if you don't compress it, you record in a live chamber music-sized auditorium. You record in Zipper Hall downtown most of the time because you clap your hands, and a second 0.8 later, the reverb is dying away. There's a beautiful piano in that room. It's also gorgeous to look at, although I didn't start with video of any production value. Paul Smith, Ella Fitzgerald, accompanist for years, came in Hawaiian shirt, tennis shoes, and shorts. I think it was the first time anybody had not seen him in a tux. We weren't ready for video back in those days. But everybody plays, everybody sings at the same time, and I get out of the way. I'm writing a book on this whole high-end world because I'm generally in the audiophile camp. I go to all those shows. A couple months ago up in Midtown at the Palace Hotel, the New York Audio Show, another one Chicago, Montreal, etc.
Expona, Rocky Mountain, all those.
The ones, yeah. And so what happens is at those shows and the books that are written about them is you deal with the disc out to the speaker. And that's all they talk about. Better cables, interconnects, little bridges to carry the wires off the floor. I mean, it's a million tweaks. And, on another interview, we can go off on that topic. But for me, it's the stuff that comes from my end of the microphone to the disc that more firmly establishes the quality of that production than anything else that you're going to spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on. So that's what I did. And now, 13 years later, I've done 85 of these things. They all have multiple mixes on them, so you can listen in straight stereo, you can listen as if you were in the middle of the ensemble, or you can listen as if you were, in the best seat in the house with the audience in front of, or with the ensemble in front of you and the audience behind you. Give people choice, let them figure out what they like.
So Mark, as you and I were talking a little bit earlier before the interview, this really has been just nothing more than a labor of love for you to get this stuff right. I mean, as it says on the back of this particular jacket, there's no dynamic processing, no EQ, and no artificial reverb. This is all pure as recorded. So as you mentioned, a drum shot is a drum shot. And if you want that dynamic, and the drummer wanted that dynamic in the piece, it should be there like that. So I have to say that, for anybody looking for pure audio, I mean, headsets are huge now. Everybody's listening for that quality. I mean, this might be what to look for if you're listening for the real experience.
Well, the toughest part, you're absolutely right. The toughest part of that equation is getting people on my side of the equation, the Elliot Shiners, the Ed Sheranys, all these guys, to acknowledge. But the fact is, they're in straitjackets as well. Who pays their bills? The bean counters at the big labels. And if it was a hit last month and we made money on it, we sure as heck better be doing the same thing the following month. So it did take somebody to pull out their wallet, my wallet, 13 years ago. Well, it's the only way to start a record label. Nobody's going to give you any money. If Mark, I've gotten in the business plan that I pitched at the time, if this is such a great idea, Mark, why isn't everybody doing this? Nobody's doing it. In fact, I wrote a blog post the other day on just that. To this point, 13 years later, there's now the pure audio, high-fidelity Blu-ray movement. There are plenty of people putting stuff as downloads of better quality, but there isn't anybody who's using the Blu-ray format to offer you what a Blu-ray can actually do. That's high-def video, all the sort of album jacket artwork, interviews, behind-the-scenes downloadable files. And in fact, you mentioned headphones because I came up with the technology. You've talked to the Smith guys. I actually take my room, which is one of the more popular rooms that's you get yourself calibrated in to get your particular head-related transfer function dialed in. I take my projects, send them out of my Blu-ray player with the stage perspective mix, a very aggressive mix, so the sounds are coming virtually all around you, and capture that sound out of my this processor with my setting on it in my room into a 2-channel stereo file. Except it's imprinted with that directionality information, and I use that box and I use that technology and I put those files on the ROM section of every disc that we put out. I put them up on iTunes under the banner of Headphones XI, and I get people at these trade shows because I can't demo every time in a room. I do that at Expona, but it's expensive, especially for a little company like ours. But if I put a set of headphones on somebody that's coming through that box and I solo each one of those speakers, I go left, I go center, I go right. The moment that I solo that right over the shoulder, I mean, it never fails. People actually jerk their head and say, that's not possible. These are special headphones. No, they're not. It's simply there's some really smart engineering guys that have figured out if it came from over there and it hit this ear and hit it this ear, there are subtle filtrations that happen because of that. And therefore, they're not doing surround headphones. They're realizing a room based on all the parameters on your particular ears. Well, it turns out your ears are not that different than mine, so that the effect maybe is 70%, but there is a future that I see, I call it personalized music delivery, where when discs do go away, and I thought we were already there until these guys in the UK and France are kicking up the Blu-ray thing again as a high-resolution format. Once we get to files like iTracks, my download site that's been going 7 years, it's real high-definition stuff. If it came from analog tape or any other format, it's not making its way up there. But when you actually think about it, if we start downloading, I can have a locker in the cloud with David's name on it, with Scott's name on it, with everybody else's individual, and along the lines of line 6, with do this acoustic modeling musical instrument thing, there is a set of filters that can be rolled on your personal device to say, I want to engage the surround version of this. I would like to emulate the world of Alexandria, $190,000 Wilson speakers. You don't need the speakers anymore. You can do the same thing to this microphone and turn it into the characteristics of a Neumann, TLM 170 if you want. We have real-time horsepower strong enough now so that the idea of personalized music delivery, if you start from something that gives you the components to play with, obviously in my case I do with my own recordings, but But imagine going a little upstream from what is generally delivered through HD tracks, through iTracks, for GeoBuzz, any of these others. If you can get your hands on that material before the mastering engineers did their radio crush on it, we could get back to fidelity that used to be there when we were back in the days of the vinyl era of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. You mentioned, I do remember the vinyl days, yes. Now you mentioned something was happening in England and France with Blu-ray. What's that?
Well, it was announced last week. Look, my little pitch here is I write 500 to 1,000 words now every day at a site called realhd-audio.com because I'm fed up with people telling me this CD delivers 20 bits. It started at DXD, it's very carefully dithered, and we got 20 bits on a CD. That's just not possible. And so I said, I do run a little contrary to the normal audiophile stream of things. I'm not anti-tape, I'm not anti-vinyl, but you guys, that's not the end of the story. We didn't perfect audio back in 1971, with Peter Frampton and all the other stuff that was on analog tape, even though Paul Stubblebine and the Tape Project do very well. It's a niche, and it's a bunch of, very passionate people about a number of things. All I want them to do is put their ears on a real high-resolution recording, one that does require more than 16 bits. So what's happened here recently, I wrote on this a couple of weeks ago, and they just had a meeting about this idea of high-fidelity, pure audio Blu-ray. That means using a disc like this. This is a Blu-ray disc. It's a single-sided disc that's got, lots of data. This one happens to have 41 different tracks on it. It's our sampler. They're 2 minutes apiece, but 3 different mixes on each one, plus high-def video of it. So look, if you, like this guy in Pennsylvania I was referring to, if you play this in your store and somebody says, I want the blues, boom, track 23. I want that in stereo, blue, track 23 in stereo. No, I'd really like to hear it in surround. Boom, 23 in surround. Oh, you don't like that piece? Let's switch to, chamber music. So that's the kind of ultimate demo, because I've been accused of being a crack dealer or a drug pusher. Once you take a listen to something that's that far outside of your mainstream listening experience, you come to appreciate it. It takes a little accommodation, but it does happen there. So the guys in the UK basically are saying, we're going to use the Blu-ray format as an audio-only, like a grown-up CD. Put it in or hit play. They're putting 3 copies of the same 2-track mixes on there. Of Bob Marley was the one I saw. The Rolling Stones have done a deal with Universal Music Group. It's done in PCM 9624. It's done in DTS MA, Master Lossless, and it's done in True HD. Dolby's part of the partnership, as a matter of fact. The problem, and then it's made to navigate so that it's a standard Blu-ray disc without need of on-screen navigation. And apparently they've been having some success in France. They're getting ready, they say, in September to roll it out in the States. My big beef about this comes to the idea of provenance. If those tracks were recorded in 1960 or 65 or 70, you better let people know that they're not high-definition tracks. They've just been put in a very large container, because analog tape at best gives you about 10 to 12 bits, and it gives you maybe 25,000 kilohertz frequency response. That's great. We're getting everything they had at the mastering room, but nothing more.
Well, hearing this is proof of concept, obviously, and proof of what you're trying to do here. So, Scott, what do you think about doing something with AVS members and getting together with Mark sometime?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I want to invite AVS members. We'll post something about this when we set it up. But we've just had this idea on camera as we're talking now to get some AVS members over to your studio. Let them listen to your room, which I've been in and is a fabulous room, and listen to some of your tracks and talk more deeply about this. If you're willing to do it, I'd say we're going to do it.
No, if people, the door is generally open on the weekends. I'm there all the time anyway. It really is, how do you prove it to people? You just let their ears have an experience. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to love Willie Nelson or Paul Williams or, Lawrence Juber. They're fabulous musicians, but what you get from that listening experience is it can be dramatically different than what we've been listening to. And in fact, sadly, just a quick cruise around the show here, everybody's now into the wireless headphone or speakers or whatever. The fact is, between HD radio and a lot of these other sort of wireless technologies, we are diminishing the quality because bandwidth is so premium. we're not expanding things like we should. In fact, I had dinner last night with a friend of mine. I said, the iTunes of 5 years from now is going to be completely streaming. It's going to be equivalent to 9624. It's going to be headphone-capable surround. It's going to be, a subscription-based model. The writing is on the wall. That's my crystal ball. And in fact, 7 years ago, I pretty much pegged where we are right now by starting iTracks as a download thing. I do discs. The reason that I do discs is to give people an easy experience, and because I shoot video of the whole thing as well. And I get a lot of people that say, that video is really cool. I'm watching Albert Lee play the guitar or somebody else, music's always been tied to visuals until we got the technology that Thomas Alva Edison put together in 1875, and then we had to get rid of the video for a while. Maybe we're back.
Are you familiar with the WISA, the Wireless Speaker and Audio Association? We just had you should be, because we just had a guy on in a different interview here. They're doing 2496 uncompressed 7.1 channels wirelessly.
I have heard that Sonos is ramping up their thing too. So this is different. Through Wi-Fi though, not through Bluetooth.
No, it's their own wireless.
You have to understand, WISA is setting a standard. They're a standards company, kind of like Wi-Fi. But they're not making anything. They're setting the standards and and supplying the proving ground. And it'd be something you might be interested in talking to them about.
I would be very interested, and we should be doing the same thing, because I can't, as much effort as I've been putting both through blogs and by being at all the conferences and getting up and talking in front of people. I am on the Grammy committee, I'm on the CEA committee, I'm on the technical working group of the AES. I straddle a bunch of those areas. But if you talk to an engineer who is just passionate about recording on analog tape, that's high def, Mark. There's no little stair steps in there at all. There's a whole bunch of other problems, but it's not digital. So if it's not digital, therefore it's high def. We have varying definitions of really qualifies. And I think we do ourselves a huge disfavor by not at least acknowledging that there are gradations to audio quality. And what comes out of an iPod right now is limited by the bits that are coming through their converter, which actually is a 9624 capable chip, but they scale it down because it uses power and processing. So the people at Astle and Kern, for instance, they've got a little $700 dedicated player that does 192. I talked to those guys. They're very nice. They've got the right idea. But what are they putting through it? They're putting content that's HD tracks, where it was recorded back at 1965 standard, put into a big bucket and sold for $30 as a high-resolution download. That's where blowback happens, where people get confused or disappointed. I thankfully have people that are maybe disappointed in the music selection, but they are not disappointed in the audio quality. I need to carve out a little niche within the record labels and the engineers so that there could be opportunities to have varying mixes delivered to varying markets, including the audiophiles getting something that's not as heavily mastered and compressed. I try.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate you being here.